Welcome everybody to the full council meeting, including members, officers and any members of the public who may be attending remotely. I think we've got a few there. Please be advised that the meeting will be live streamed and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the council's website. The following staff are in attendance: the Chief Executive, the Monitoring Officer, Democratic Services, and I think that's everybody today, is it? Oh, yeah. Excellent, I think that is everybody. Wonderful. Agenda item 1 will be the emergency evacuation procedures. There is no scheduled test of the fire alarm, so if it does sound out the nearest exit, don't push, don't shove, behave yourselves, you know where you're going. No coming back in the building until you're told to do so by myself and the Chief Exec. And yeah, as I say, anyone need any assistance at all getting out or evacuating? Excellent.
Oh, yes.
Lovely, thank you.
So can I?
Yep.
So, Councillor Clark, in the event of a fire, can we ask that you please stay where you are, and one of my colleagues will, or myself, one of us will take you down. We are trained to use the evacuation chair, so we will take you down in there. So please, in the event of a fire, don't move, just stay where you are. Thank you.
Having previously done said training and whatnot, I know that it's actually quite an uncomfortable ride, just to forewarn you. So agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I will invite the Chief Exec to give the apologies.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have had apologies for absence from Councillor James Hall and Councillor Mike Whiting, Councillor Simon Clark, Councillors Kieran Golding and Councillors Mark Tucker have given apologies but are online but will be unable to vote. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thanks very much. Are there any others? Nope. In which case we shall move to agenda item 3, which is the minutes. Do members approve the minutes of the full council meeting held on?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to raise a point of order in regards to the minutes from the last full council meeting. This is under Rule 3.1.5, urgent items. So at the last meeting there was an urgent item raised and put onto the agenda last minute, and you will note that in the rules of meetings it says the Mayor may accept an item for consideration which has not been included on the agenda for the meeting if they are satisfied that it needs to be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency. The reason for the urgency shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting, and it was minute item 142 from the last meeting. There's been no reasons given as to why that matter was urgent.
Is it that you're requesting that the minutes be amended with the reason?
Yes.
Yep, we can certainly do that. Beyond that, are there any other...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I'm making the point of order under section 100B of the Local Government Act 1972, section...
Sorry, which section of the Constitution?
It says in the Constitution, you either state the section of the Constitution or the Act, the legal reason for it. The reason is the Local Government Act 1972, section 100B, paragraph 4B. If you want, I can read it out for you, but it actually states that the special circumstances should be recorded in the minutes. And I think it would be appropriate this evening, as it was decided on some special circumstances, for the special circumstances to be highlighted this evening that are going to be added to the minutes. Thank you.
Also says people stand up when stand up when they
It will be added to the minutes, the Chief Exec, unless you want to come in at all on that. No. So they will be added to the minutes. Are members happy to approve the minutes? Lovely. So that was minute numbers 128 to 146. Moving on to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Do members have any interests to declare?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to say that I'm a holder of a small lotteries licence, because we're discussing the Gaming Act later, so I just thought I'd let you know.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Baldock?
Been advised that I ought to mention I'm a KCC councillor and Seashells debate is something about KCC, but it will not impact my judgment.
Councillor Booth?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. In a similar vein, as a Kent County Councillor and Chairman of the KCC Scrutiny Committee, item 10 will be coming up at a later meeting. I've come here with an open mind this evening and will take part in the debate and then use my judgment on whether to vote or not. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Lehman?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Same as Councillor Booth and Councillor Baldock, but if you need me to spell that out in more words, good, thank you.
Councillor Worcester?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I sit on the steering group for Seashells, and obviously I've seconded that motion this evening, so I'd like that to be noted as well. Thank you.
Any more for any more? Excellent, we are there or thereabouts. So item 5 is going to be my announcements. I will try and keep it brief because I think we've got a fair whack on the agenda. Yep, excellent. Everything okay there? Sorry, wasn't sure. Have I missed something? No. Lovely. Right, so in terms of my announcements, since we last met back in July, myself and where's my Deputy Garden Councillor Watson? You're hidden away there. Have attended around 20 events over the summer. Quite a busy period for a summer period. Normally it's the quiet time where you get a bit of time to catch up with yourself. Not so much this year. So those have included the Civic Service, the Kent Karting Championships held here in Sittingbourne, the opening of the Hop Festival, Sittingbourne Carnival, where some of you may have seen me get gazumped into a horse and carriage without any notice, which was a bit of a surprise. The RNLI Summer Ball, where they raised thousands, literally thousands of pounds on the night, where we did see some other councillors around and about. I won't say in what state any of us were. The Faversham CLT meeting, opening Gore Court Hockey Club's new pitches. We had the 140th anniversary of Sittingbourne Salvation Army, where I think the leader spoke very well. We've had Swale Citizens Advice AGM, Satida Quiz, the opening of new facilities at Borden Grammar, and then coming into this week itself, I was at Lansdowne Primary School in Merston yesterday for their Microsoft Showcase Award celebration. To say what the primary age children are using technology-wise in that school is beyond me, is an understatement. We're talking lessons with VR headsets. Every child uses a tablet for writing, typing. They are programming robots at the age of 5. It's one of them actually asked me when they were showing me one of the pieces of software they use whether I did any video editing when I was at school, and I had to fess up and say not until secondary, and it involved splicing actual tape, to which the response was, what, sellotape? So certainly how to make one feel old there. And today, this morning, I was at the Autism Apprentices SEN Information Day held at the Woodstock Club. It was really well attended event with lots of information for parents with children who have conditions such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, with lots of wonderful organisations coming together. And again, it's seeing a different side of what education is available to our young people in this borough, and it was good to show some support for such a well-organised charity that does so much work within this area. I know some people in the room have had personal experience with Autism Apprentice and what they do, but some of the referral places that they can go to now, the forest schools, the sensory equipment that's available, the speech and language professor that was in attendance giving a speech. It was a really well organised day, and I'm sure will bring some much needed information to the parents that needed it. With that, Within the announcements, I'll also welcome the latest councillor to our ranks, the new councillor for Priory Ward, Councillor Alex Eyre, hiding behind Councillor Gould there. You have some very big shoes to fill, I'm afraid, but you were already fully aware of that. I don't think any of us will expect you to make 2 points tonight, but they may well do in the future. Beyond that, we'll call that to a close and move on to our next agenda item, which is tributes to former Mayor and Alderman Steve Worrell. I will invite Councillor Harrison. Ooh, before I invite Councillor Harrison, I'll just mention the change in date of the funeral. So you will have received an original email stating the 7th of October. It has been rescheduled for Monday the 21st of October at midday at Bobbin Crematorium. So that's Trafalgar Day at midday. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Where do I start? Steve was, I think, one of the first inclusive people, councillors on this council. In those days, we had elections in thirds, so basically there was an election every damn year. And the next new member of the group that come on, it was, oh, do you want to sit on this? Oh, do you want to sit on this? You know, fresh blood. So, you know, it was never, oh no, that you've got to be here 50 years before you can get onto P&R. It was basically a new blood. You get offered anything and everything. He was passionate about Labour, but only in this chamber, in terms of politics. It was never personal with Steve, most of the time anyway. And I, being quite young and quite new, well, why are you going down the pub with, you know, like the leader of the Conservatives? Well, you know, in the chamber we can go at each other's throats, and by golly, did they go at each other's throats in those days? If it was, if you transferred that to today, there would be so many complaints. It would be untrue, but it was very vicious and vociferous in those days, and I used to sit here thinking, oh God, don't mention my name, because that's how it made you feel. But once you walked out that door, that was it. It wasn't personal. It wasn't, oh no, I don't like you. And I think that in some ways we got away from that for quite a while, because it shouldn't be personal. There are I can remember a colleague sitting across there who just retired as an MP. For many years, we were as one on one particular item. I'm not going to raise it here because you'll think she's a heathen, but you know, we have our differences, but most of the time we are here for our residents, and that was really what Steve was about. And I can remember him saying to me one day, oh, he was really busy when we had the new town centre put in. We had our very own clerk of the works. Steve Worrell was down there day and night watching what they were doing and reporting back, and oh no, missed that bit, and do you not think that'd be better that way? And we did get a really decent job. Lost the thread. What I was going to say was that it was all about us. That was it. So he was up down there, and he had this woman ring him, can you come round and see me? Well, I can't come round for a few days because I've got, you know, keeping an eye on him down the town. It's when he eventually got round there. Yeah, what's the problem? Can you smell that gas? You've called me round here because you can smell gas. But that was like 3 days ago. Well, yeah. Well, you know, it's not for me to contact the gas company, is it? And he was so gobsmacked. He did contact the gas company for her, but you just think, wow, we are not your social workers. On the other end of the scale, there were people who went to the nth degree and then said, look, I've exhausted everything, Steve. I've been to everyone. Is there anything you can do to help? And we need to have a balance on that. There is a lasting tribute to Steve, apart from the town centre that he spent so many hours in, and that is that many moons ago when he campaigned for a crossing across the railway at Westminster, whereas some people know we actually had a village there, 2 pubs, you know, thriving enterprise. It may have been these days termed slums, but people lived there. And it was very dangerous, but he campaigned, and that bridge is still there across the railway today. So when people, you know, we can't all come up with oh yeah, well that's my lasting tribute, or I want my name on that new close. But sometimes there are things that you've campaigned for, and you know, you really feel passionate about, because that's what the residents need, not always want, need. And that will be a lasting tribute to Honorary Alderman, former councillor Steve Worrell. There are so many stories. A lot of you knew him, a lot of you didn't. Those of you who did know him, I hope that as many of you as you can will attend the funeral, because he did a lot for this council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I'll now call upon Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really another sad day for Swale, following on the heels of Councillor Henderson and Councillor Peter Morgan. We are really losing a lot of our institutional memory and people who have done a lot for this council over a long period of time. I first met Steve Worrell. I won't be saying his surname very often, as it's one of those words I have trouble with. But I first met Steve when I was a member of the Labour Party in the Zeros, and you didn't not know he was in a room. He had an opinion on nearly everything, and it was a firm, forthright opinion. Sometimes he would, you know, say what the rest of us were thinking, but many were too scared to say or too uncertain how to say it. Well, once Steve had said it, you just sat there and clapped, because he put into words, fiery words, what many of us were thinking, and it would have come out a bit garbled if we'd have tried to do it. I learnt a lot from Steve about local representation, about being a local councillor. I hadn't been one at that point. Had a couple of goes, and he'd always say to me afterwards, even though they were hopeless seats, and I'm really bad at accents, as you know, but this is particularly bad. He's like, well, I thought you were going to be joining us here. And I'm like, no, thanks, Steve, but that was really hopeless. No, there's nothing hopeless. I know it didn't sound like him, but but the sentiments of it, that's what he was getting. And I always thought that he was probably on the left, but he never seemed to be involved in any of the factions or anything. It all just came from the art. He just saw what he saw, thought what he thought, and damn well said what he said. And when I left Labour over various issues, I thought, I was a bit scared of meeting him again. And back in those days, Calc, we would meet here every quarter, and in December he would invite us. When he was the mayor, he invited us into his chamber for Christmas drinks. I have a bad accent coming up. And he said, "You ain't going to talk to me then?" And I thought, well, I wasn't sure if you were going to talk to me. "Oh, don't be so stupid, you've got to just do what you're going to do." And that's what I thought, got that wrong. He's not petty either. And as Councillor Harrison said, you know, what you believe in, he accepted it. He might not agree with you. I might rip the out of you in the chamber. But outside, he was, just treated you like a good human being. And I haven't seen a lot of him since he sadly ceased to be a councillor. But I will always remember him fondly. And I think, again, we as a community have lost someone very special. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two glowing and well-deserved tributes there. And you're right, there's not a huge amount of members in the chamber now that actually was in the chamber with Steve. I was lucky, and I mean lucky enough to have been one of those who was. You cannot ever dispute his personality. Like him or loathe him in the chamber, he was an incredibly passionate, loud gentleman who didn't take fools lightly, and as Councillor Baldock said, was only too happy to share his opinion and views many, many times to the administration at the time. But again, as it's been said, he walked out the doors, it was done. A caring gentleman, a wealth of knowledge. I always found him a decent guy. But the one example of his personality which sometimes could get into a spot of bother, and for all the wrong reasons, but actually stood out because it's the only time since I've been in the chamber, and he's a man who stuck to his principles on the actual evening. From what I recall, he's the only councillor since I've been a councillor, others have come close, to actually been removed from the meeting. Councillor Gent was mayor at the time. And Steve did have a tendency at times to use the word dictator and other words. And it did knock one or two people. And on this particular night, he carried on and was warned, but he wouldn't back down. And he'd never back down. And I think that's from the comments, that's something which not only in this chamber would he do that, but also outside. He was, from what I can tell, something a councillor who is an absolute credit to his residents. He was a credit to this council, a big personality, a fun personality. Sadly, and I genuinely mean this, I was hoping to go to the funeral on the 7th. I can't do that date. It's not because I don't want to, it's because I can't. But I will always remember him fondly and with huge amounts of respect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Perkin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I wasn't a member of Swale Borough Council at the time that Steve was, so I turned to colleagues who knew him. So the following tribute is actually from another Councillor Martin from Faversham. Steve was an absolute fixture at SBC. He always stood up for people, particularly those in his ward, and he worked hard for Swale and stood by his principles. He knew his role on the council and the borough itself really well, and as with most sailors turned publicans, he knew how to command a room when needed. When he made a point, it was always considered and listened to, and he was a valued colleague to members across political divides. If you can run the Red Lion in Bluetown and be on the council for some 40 years, you must be quite a good egg. My condolences to his many family and friends within this chamber and beyond, from myself and all the Liberal Democrat group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Are there any other members which wish to speak? Councillor Winklis.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, most has already been said about him, but I first joined this chamber in 2011, and he really taught me a few things. And the ruling administration at the time was the members opposite, but not many of them are still here. And they were like a dog to a bone with them. He was really aggressive in this chamber and really got his point and spoke with great passion. He was a true socialist, and as our Councillor Harrison said, he fought for Sheerness. He was a councillor there for 43 years. Now, if you keep getting re-elected for 43 years in your ward, whatever party you're in, then you must be doing something right. And I was here that night, as Councillor Bowen said, when he wouldn't let go. He was ranting and raving, and the mayor at the time was Councillor Gent. She said, "Will you leave?" And "I'm not going," he said. And I thought he was going to be ordered out, but he did go. He was a character, and as already been said, from all sides of this chamber, we haven't got many of them characters left now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winklis. Would anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was first introduced to Steve Worrell when I was about 13 or 14 years old, and I was running a campaign about the recognition being given to people who had served, women who had served in the Women's Land Army. And I emailed out to all councillors, and Steve came back to me, asked to talk on the phone because he didn't want to do it by email, and I had a long conversation with him where he explained to me at length how I could bring my campaign to full council and I could seek the support, which I duly did with his guidance. It was quite intimidating for someone of that age to come here and speak, but he met me at the entrance. He brought me up. He asked if I needed any support with what I was going to say, and at that meeting I put that forward and got full support across the chamber to write to the minister at the time regarding my campaign, and that stays with you, that level of support that he gave me. And a few years later, when I was old enough and joined the Labour Party, I got to know Steve as Councillor Baldock describes, someone who in Labour Party meetings would be pretty entertaining, to say the least, who enjoyed making contributions by whispering just loud enough so that everybody could hear the point he was trying to make, when he would then look across the room once he'd got the sort of response he wanted, which would vary from time to time, and would then wink at me. And then you got to learn when he was going to make those sorts of contributions, because he always had a bit of a twinkle in his eye before he did so. But no matter who he offended in that room, who he might have potentially upset or who he might have won over, afterwards, when he'd stand out the front waiting for his lift home, he would be talking to everybody, smoothing things back over, because we were all part of the same team as far as he was concerned. And I think that's what the people in Sheerness saw in him, how he was able to keep winning in that ward, because he was part of that team. That's what people felt that he stood for. And people like my nan, who voted him in time and time again, knew that they could walk into town, speak to Steve, raise that issue with him, and he'll do the best he could. And I think that serves as a good example for all of us in this chamber to do the best we can by our residents, but not potentially to take his lead in the way he always sometimes conducted himself in meetings, which is in a pretty disruptive fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Would anybody else? Councillor Worcester.
I just wanted to say quickly, I didn't know Steve Worrell. I'm far too young, I'm afraid. But I wanted to just quickly mention his legacy, because I know Councillor Harrison's mentioned it, but I do know a number of Steve's family, and I would think that he is extremely proud that since he's finished becoming a councillor, we have seen his family actually come to this chamber and speak on a couple of items, and I would hope that they feel that they've absolutely done him proud by coming along and taking part in his legacy, voicing their opinions, whichever way it went. And I'm really proud to know those people, and I'm hoping they're either on the meeting tonight or they're going to look back at the meeting. They know that Steve is being discussed this evening. And I think he would be incredibly proud that they've taken part in active debates that this area obviously meant so much to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Any further? So before I ask for us to stand for a minute in silence, I'll just add some of the information that I've had. So I hadn't met Steve. I may well have done at some point in the years, being dragged around all sorts of places. But I have been contacted by a number of past mayors and by the former MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey as well, among many others. And it didn't matter which party grouping or which side of any party you were on. The one thing that they've all said is that he was a man of principle who would respect anyone from any party unless they had no principles. And I think that sums up the sort of councillor everybody should be. Someone of principle, somebody who serves their constituents well, and somebody who, all right, at times might push the boundaries, but will stand up for what they believe. And I think that's what most of us in this room are here to do, and to do the very best for the public. And evidently, Steve Worrell was one of those exemplars, and you certainly don't get elected for 43 years on the bounce without being that. So if I could ask everybody to stand for a minute's slight silence, pause and reflection. Agenda item 7 is questions submitted by the public. No questions have been received from the public. I would, of course, encourage councillors to remind your residents that they do have the opportunity to ask questions at full council meetings should they wish to, and details on how they can submit their questions are outlined in the agenda packs when they are when they're published on the website. Agenda item 8, questions submitted by members. We have 2 questions submitted by members. I will ask each member their question in turn and then invite the chair of the relevant service committee to respond. Then I will ask if they have a supplementary question. Question 1, Councillor Hannah Perkin.
Thanks. They're both from me, so that's a bit awkward. So my first question is to the Chair of Housing and Health Committee. I've recently been working with a number of residents that are waiting a completely unacceptable time for their PIP reviews. One resident I've been supporting has already been waiting for 40 weeks and has been told that it will be a minimum of 55 weeks. Is there more that the council could be doing to support residents in a similar position?
Councillor Harrison.
Well, fortunately, I have to read out the answer that the officers have given. Otherwise, my answer might have mentioned taser in there somewhere. But if you asked a supplementary, I might get it in. I am aware that there has been a backlog of PIP reviews for several years. I've asked officers to contact the DWP to understand the latest position and what more can be done. I'm still awaiting their response. DWPs, not our officers. As a council, we will review any other benefits that residents may be entitled to and signpost them to other avenues of support whilst they wait. We have developed our support in partnership with the voluntary and community sector to help people access support throughout One Swell roadshows, our targeted support through Household Support Fund, and our continued financial support of Swell Citizens Advice Service. Thank you.
Councillor Perkin, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thanks for that answer. Great to mention the One Swell roadshows. I think they've been really great. Is there any possibility of any online roadshows, just because of people having disability and not being able to potentially go to the venues that these are being held in?
Councillor Harrison.
I will take that back, because actually that's quite a good idea. Because normally I'm flying the flag for, no, my residents aren't online, they haven't got a computer, they haven't got one of these things. They want face to face. But yeah, there should be a selection, and I will take that back. What I was going to say also is that I know that the DWP are are reviewing this PIP review thing, so that there is a more light touch every 10 years rather than this, oh, we're going to drag it out. I know some people have a condition which gets better, fair, and that's great. But as one of my residents says, Ange, my bleep bleep leg ain't going to grow back, is it? So, you know, there does seem to be there needs to be a lot more common sense in some of these areas, and that is what our officers are trying to pursue with them. And if there's anything we can do to help, we will be there. If there's anything we can push it along with, we'll be doing it. And I will take back the online stuff. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Question 2, Councillor Perkin.
Thank you. This is a question to the Chair of Economy and Property and also the Chair of Community and Leisure. So it's a double whammy. The centre of Faversham is increasingly full of cars parked along previously double yellow lines that have been left to fade and are reportedly now unenforceable. The Joint Transportation Board will not open a discussion on reinstating the lines because senior members are looking at other ways of controlling parking. The pedestrianisation of the town centre was mentioned. Could I please have an update on the scheme and an expected timeline?
There's Councillor Bonney or Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members will be aware that the administration investigated support for town centre pedestrianisation schemes in the period following the COVID-related town centre closures. Following positive indications, we committed to exploring this further for Faversham and dedicated the town centre reserve funding to preparatory work. As part of this, we undertook an equalities impact assessment, which was clear that the scheme would require exemption for blue badge holders. In order not to have a negative impact for disabled residents and visitors. Kent County Council would be responsible for enforcing the violations of any ANPR supported pedestrianisation scheme, and they've advised they are working with their contractor camera provider to enable appropriate exemptions for the blue badge holders, that is. All KCC schemes have been temporarily on hold as the Department of Transport changed vehicle owner access software. This hold was released to enable schemes to progress only in mid-September. We have been and continue to be dependent on the third-party timescale. Implementation will also require further formal engagement and consultation from KCC on the use of their enforcement powers and as part of the traffic regulation order process via the Joint Transport Board. Members may wish to note that KCC have very recently remarked the yellow lines on Preston Street, and the traffic order has been sealed, allowing enforcement action be taken by Swale Borough Council's enforcement contractors. Thank you.
Councillor Perkin, do you have a supplementary?
Thanks for that answer. It sounds to me like that there isn't a timeline for it at the moment, for understandable reasons. There's lots of sounds like lots of stuff we're waiting on from KCC. So does that mean that in that interim period there will be no discussion about putting lines back in so that we can enforce the town centre? Because it is dangerous. I appreciate Preston Street is done, but I get multiple complaints regularly about the centre of town, and I've been told that I'm not allowed to bring it to JTB until there is a discussion about it with senior councillors.
Councillor Palmer.
Okay, thank you for the supplementary question. I don't think we can be held responsible for third parties such as KCC, but I think we should try to put pressure on them. However, I'm surprised that I think any member should be able to bring something up to the Joint Transport Board, and I'm sure that the KCC member covering Faversham should be able to bring that up to the Cabinet member as well as to JTB and other representatives on there. It does surprise me that you can't raise something to the Joint Transport Board, which is the vehicle that most people do raise these sort of issues with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. That concludes questions from members. Again, do double check your agenda pack, ladies and gents. You can, of course, submit questions by the deadline, and it is all outlined on the front of your agenda. Agenda item 9 is the leader's statement. I will ask the leader to read his statement, and then I will ask the leaders of the opposition groups to respond in the usual way. Following that, I will invite other members to respond to the leader's statement. Members invited to speak will have 3 minutes. This item has an overall time limit of 30 minutes. To ensure broad fairness, I will try to invite members from the administration and opposition groups in roughly equal numbers. This may mean that I deviate from the order in which members have indicated a wish to speak. Can I please remind all members that responses must be to the issues raised in the leader's statement. Councillor Tim Gibson as leader, would you like to give your verbal statement?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, one and all. Firstly, could I, as leader of the council, align myself with the tributes paid to former Mayor Alderman Steve Worrell. Like many here this evening, I never had the fortune of sharing the chamber with Steve, but through so many anecdotes from those that did, I know that he was thoroughly respected, forthright, and a truly outstanding representative, advocate and servant to his residents in Sheerness. Whilst reflecting on members past, I would also like to take this opportunity, if Mr. Mayor you hadn't stolen my thunder on this one, to welcome our newest councillor to the chamber and formally congratulate Liberal Democrat councillor Alex Eyre on successfully being elected as member representing Prior Ward after the sad passing of former councillor Mike Henderson. Welcome, Alex, and good to have you amongst us. Moving on, it's fitting that it's in Steve Worrell's old political stomping ground of Sheerness where I continue my leader's statement. In particular with the Sheerness Revival Project, where amongst other things young people will benefit from increased opportunities to learn the valuable skills that they need to support them as they embark upon their working lives, following approval of the plans for the expansion of Sheppey College, which is a key component of our 20 million project. The new facilities will make provision for accommodating more students and also for a wider range of vocational aligned courses with subjects including creative skills, engineering and logistics. Providing these opportunities will equip local 16 to 19-year-olds with the prerequisite skills that they need to thrive in today's job market and provide a valuable contribution to the local economy. Improving the education and training opportunities for young people in Sheerness and wider areas is one of the fundamental strategies that we as an administration have strived to achieve. Staying with Sheerness, young developing craftsmen and women will soon have a space to ply their trade and build their businesses with the support of a local charity. Our plans to transform the existing garages at Masters House into 3 workshops, a toilet and kitchenette have now been approved. These modern, sustainably built workshops will provide a perfect space for artists, ceramists, woodworkers, screen printers and more to practice their craft and create and grow a business. The Launch It charity will work with and empower these young entrepreneurs, assisting them to fulfil their potential by providing the space, mentoring and training needed to start up a business. Masters House, of course, is already home to a number of small businesses, following a 1.5 million investment into its refurbishment from this council. A venue which is expertly run under the auspices of former Borough Councillor Denise Knight, the enterprise manager at Launch It. Crossing back onto the mainland, we have teamed up with Kent Police and other partners to implement measures to tackle antisocial behaviour, such as street drinking and youth nuisance in Sittingbourne High Street. Public space protection orders are now in place to address street drinking and give officers from Kent Police and the Council powers to issue fines or take court action in a bid to make the High Street a safer place. The Council's Rough Sleepers team have been working closely with the police and the High Street to provide help and support to any individuals who are perceived to be homeless. However, it is the case that many of the offenders have been found not to be homeless at all. Local charities, Forward Trust and Brockdale CRC are also assisting in working to tackle the root cause of the problem by engaging with these groups and offering the support they need to change their behaviour. The Council's licensing team have also been working with licensed premises on the High Street to make sure they're selling alcohol responsibly and looking after the welfare of their customers through limiting their alcohol consumption. The Council's Service Streets project, including uniformed marshals patrolling a High Street, bolstering the Council's Swale Link project and additional CCTV, has also contributed to tackling these issues. We appreciate that Sittingbourne High Street is not unique in having its antisocial behaviour problems, and of course we would like to implement these measures throughout the borough, but unfortunately the government's and subsequent PCC guidelines led to us having to target specified areas for engagement in order to access funding. Moving on to the eastern part of the borough, a one-of-a-kind Newton Space Garden, complete with a space-themed play area and planetarium has been created in Faversham. The garden is a brainchild of Brogdale Collection, and centre stage will be a sapling grown from seeds of the very apple tree that inspired Sir Isaac Newton's theory of gravity. The garden will also showcase 8 additional apple trees with connections to space and Newton, a living willow planetarium which has been planted, and a space-themed play area. We provided a £7,000 grant from our Rural Small Business Grant Fund and was funded by Rural England's Prosperity Fund to make this project possible. We also provided the trustees of Graveney and Goodnestone Village Hall with a grant of £7,000 from the Council Community Infrastructure Fund. This funding, along with other grants, enabled the installation of 34 solar panels on the hall's roof and a battery system to store the generated electricity, reduce costs and potentially sell back surplus to the grid. As a non-profit organisation, the trustees have ensured that the hall has become a key destination for residents to meet, socialise and have fun. Initiatives like this will help bring carbon reduction benefits, promote the use of renewable energy and assist in the long-term sustainability of the hall in line with the Council's green agenda. Finally, we are looking to develop a new disposal and community asset transfer policy, which will outline a framework for identifying and transferring surplus assets, such as land, property and buildings, to charities, voluntary organisations and town councils. The goal is to promote greater community ownership and management of local assets. Key principles which will underpin the approach to community asset transfer will include a focus on community benefit, financial viability, transparency and accountability. Taking ownership of an asset comes with challenges, so the policy will also set out what interested organisations need to consider and ensure that transfers are successful. This policy is part of the Council's commitment to working in partnership with local communities and the voluntary sector, as outlined in the Council's corporate plan and property asset management strategy. In closing, with November not too far away, I remind you that we will be holding our service of remembrance on Sunday the 10th of November at 10 a.m. at St Michael's Church in Sittingbourne, followed by an act of remembrance at the Sittingbourne War Memorial at 11 a.m. And services are also being held throughout the remainder of the borough, and councillors will be laying wreaths as a mark of respect. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Bowen, would you like to provide your response?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gibson, Leader, for your statement. Similarly, in the same vein, welcome to Councillor Alex Eyre to your first council meeting. As I said a few minutes ago, enjoy your time here. It is meant to be fun. It is fun. Sometimes can get a bit angsty, though, which we might see later. I thank the Leader for his comments about Master's House. I think that's good news, a long time coming, but good news. And also agree under the very considerate and capable eye of former Councillor Knights, and I say in charge, because she is in charge there. I also welcome the Safer Streets statement and agree that antisocial behaviour, particularly in the high street, and it's not just confined to the high streets, sadly all across the borough, but actually we can't cover all across the borough with this. But those who see the comments on social media and talking to residents, that there does seem to be a growing trend of antisocial behaviour, sometimes fuelled by alcohol, sometimes fuelled by other substances. Theft as well, quite regularly seeing comments about along the High Street and Sittingbourne and other places. And a particular bone bearer of mine is I really wish they would do something about motorised scooters. They are, quite frankly, lethal, as sadly we found out, I think, recently in a house fire. Couple of other points, I think, from the Leader's statement, which I'll say is welcome, but there's a lot which he could have said, and it seems that the one item which he doesn't want to go to, and I will, is bins, because that, quite frankly, is still, I think, the number one item in the borough. But also not just to not to critique it, because you've got to give the new setup the option to run. It is still early days.
If we can get back to what was in the statement. I know we want to talk about what wasn't in the statement, but we can't. We need to stick to what was in the statement. Sorry, Councillor Bowen.
The only thing I was going to say about the bins is actually a compliment to all councillors, because over the last few months we have taken a heck of a lot of time as individuals to help facilitate the contract and the introduction of the service. It has taken its toll on every single member in this chamber, and that's why I wanted to put it into this statement. My only other two items, again, it has mentioned, is I would draw members' attention to the boundary review, get involved with that when it comes forward. And at this particular time, I finish off with the world in the state that it seems to be going towards, and quite frankly, for me, I think we're approaching potentially one of the deepest, darkest moments in my lifetime. It is a horrible place that sometimes I just wish people would actually realise that discrimination breeds hatred, breeds revenge, breeds more hatred, and puts us down a very dangerous path. We are better when we work as one. We are better when we work as a human race. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I gave you a little bit of leeway. Councillor Perkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Leader, for your words. First of all, I just want to open by saying Happy Black History Month to everybody. October is Black History Month, so that's an opportunity for us all. I know it's not in your speech. I will get back to it. I know it's not in the speech. I can see your face, Councillor Baldock, horrified at that comment. Thank you very much for everything that's happened in Masters House. I think it sounds incredible, as does the project on the Sheerness revival. Support for young people has been something that I know the council has been working on for a very long time now, so it's lovely to see that come to fruition and for new projects to be opened. Street drinking and tackling homelessness in Sittingbourne is obviously very welcome. Echo the leader's comments that it would have been nice to have seen some greater rollout across the borough. As a massive sci-fi dork, the space theme play area sounds incredible, and I want to go and look at it immediately. And obviously supportive of the idea of putting together a new community ownership scheme. We love a little bit of devolution to parish and town council, so I'm into that as an idea. And as you mentioned, November, this is a loose, see what I've done there? So you mentioned November. I'd just like to highlight that there is a Dementia Awareness Day in Faversham on the 7th of November. Everyone is welcome. They have a virtual dementia tour bus, which you can go and experience what it's like to live with dementia yourself. I've done it myself. It's an incredible experience. If you've got any time, please do pop along and come and speak to the people that are doing amazing work in the borough. Thank you.
I think you just about used all your leniency there as well.
Thank you very much,
Would anybody else like to respond to the leader's statement? Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've got the Children's Centre coming up, so I'll make this quite short and sweet. Thank you very much for talking about the Sheerness Revival Project, Leader. And all I will say, the comment is, it's very disappointing to obviously see, as much as SWAL does to put effort, time, funding back into Sheerness, to see our KCC authority apparently work against us to remove services for those young people is quite shocking. But that's obviously coming up a little bit later. But thank you very much for bringing it up in your statement.
Tenuous at best. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to hear what the council and the police are doing in the town centre. But what about the outlying areas? We have antisocial behaviour happening at the moment in Archers Park on the Meads. And I've contacted the police and our officers in the Community Safety Unit to try and get updates, try and find out what's being done and make sure things are being done, and don't get any response whatsoever. That the police have had a lot of changes over this last year and things were meant to be getting better. We do have, at one point, a couple of times I've seen a PC that does come along to Bobbin Parish Council. But we used to have a lot of briefings for members. There was a lot more working closely with the police. That doesn't happen anymore. I don't think we've had a community safety briefing for years now in this chamber. And just wonder, can the leader just take that back? Please, can you get some briefings? We need to know what's going on out in the communities. We need to work closer with the police, not just in the town centres, but in all other areas across the borough. Thank you.
Yeah, I think as it's come up a couple of times, I wholeheartedly support the councillors who've raised the issues and the leader around antisocial behaviour. I have spent quite a considerable amount of time recently talking to the leader and other councillors around the issues of community safety but antisocial behaviour, particularly around the high streets. But as you say, it spokes out. So I actually witnessed someone being assaulted in East Street in front of the doctor's surgery who'd come out. And what I found is that doctor's surgery had contacted the police over 9 or 10 times, where either their property had been damaged, patients had been assaulted, various other things, and not one instance did the police respond or turn up to that, which I think is utterly appalling, which is why I bring it up in this council meeting. And as a council, we suffer a huge amount of financial burden as a result of vandalism to our assets. We're talking probably a couple of 100,000. We'd ask the officers to actually dig that number out for us. But the cost to us and the cost to our residents of antisocial behaviour, and it's not all alcohol related. Some of these are youths who, quite frankly, and we've seen them downstairs in a car park, we've seen them on the high street, it needs to be tackled. It's not just the police, it is various things. It is also people taking responsibility for their offspring, quite frankly. It is a disgrace, and it is tarnishing our town centres, it's deterring businesses, and it has a fundamental impact overall. So we do need that community safety to pull together, but we need to implore with our MPs and the police to actually take action. And that's what I would ask of the leader and all councillors, whatever avenue they have, whatever lever, to try and get some action, because it is just so appalling that nothing is done when you actually witness something. In fact, it was 2 assaults within about 20 minutes that took place.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. I have Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I also remember these very many briefings that we used to have on community safety and policing and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, things go in cycles, and the current, well, let's get them out of it, but the cycle we're in at the moment is everybody's in the silo, everybody's in the bunker, mine, I'm not helping you, that's yours, so you've got to pay for that. And we really need to, over the years, we have served our residents best right across the piece, whether it's police, county, borough, when we've worked together in place, where we've sat round the table, everyone who's got a vested interest. Right, there's a problem in the Meads. Well, we need the schools people, because there's a lot of kids there not going to school. There's AS, right, we need this. And you actually targeted the areas. Tim, whose name escapes me, but I can see his face, did offer to come to... No, it wasn't. Another police bloke. Pardon? Bell? No. He'll come to me. He offered to come to Sheerness, but I'll bow and ask that we invite him to Swale for a briefing. The Chief Constable, Tim. I knew him years ago.
He was on the assistant chief.
No, years ago he was actually quite lowly, but he remembered me. But no, we had them here once a year. The Chief Constable Kent came here once a year.
Mr. Mayor, if I may be so bold, Tim Smith.
That's him, yeah. Nice bloke. But the only way to actually achieve the things that we want to achieve is to have the people at the top cracking the whip to the people at the bottom. Because the people are saying, oh, well, I walked down Sittingbourne High Street and I didn't notice anything. Well, you must be blind, love, because, it's obvious. So we really need to get back to that. And I know that we are looking at these place-type issues in the future. Is somebody online who shouldn't be?
No.
Oh, I know that we're looking at, trying to work together better in the future across the piece. But so let's make a start. Let's get this geezer in and have a good old natter with him and see what he's prepared to do to help our residents who pay more to him than my residents pay to Swale Borough Council. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I've got Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I'll try and be very brief, and it was good that the leader brought up some of the antisocial issues. I'm actually having a meeting with the Police and Crime Commissioner on the 10th of October, and following some concerns raised, one of the questions I'm asking him at the Police and Crime panel is about antisocial behaviour, not just in the high streets but also in the rural communities. But just for information, the Community Safety Partnership did put on a briefing last year. I believe it was earlier this year, I believe, in January, I believe about 3 councillors turned up, and the same was the year before. And I think during the COVID years they tried to put it online and had no response. So I think sometimes we have to take up the mantle ourselves. But of course, area committees are very good at highlighting their own issues, because I've attended Sheppey Area Committee recently and they had the inspector from the police there raising and having issues looked at. So maybe, you know, we can have a borough-wide thing, but sometimes let's keep it local and direct it to the local issues. But thank you for the leader for highlighting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. I have Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just along the same topic, I welcome what the leader said about the town centre multi-agency meetings, because they have been really effective at bringing all the relevant people together, and it does need to be replicated in looking at some of these issues that have been highlighted by other members in other parts of the borough. But I was going to make the point that Councillor Palmer made about the area committees, because actually these multi-agency meetings arose from a discussion that was had at the Sittingbourne Area Committee, and I think they can be quite important when you get a police representative to come along, as we also had at the Sittingbourne Area Committee in December last year, and I know the chair of the Sittingbourne Area Committee is hoping to invite them along again, because it does get a lot of public interest, because it matters a lot to our residents. And I also just would like to say that whilst we were promised a new policing plan from the Police and Crime Commissioner about more neighbourhood focused policing, that hasn't delivered for what the expectations were for people. And as Councillor Harrison pointed out, they take a greater chunk of council tax than we get here as Swale Borough Council. So I really do think we need to be asking more of them about how this plan's actually delivering, and whether they're meeting their recruitment targets, and what the government can do through their announcement for 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs to make sure that we're starting to get that function in neighbourhood policing that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Would anybody else wish to? Excellent. Well, looks like we're there. So, Councillor Gibson, I'll give you your opportunity to respond.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Bowen, worry not, there's enough width to allow you to speak about bins. And as I say, it hasn't been a great time for most of us, and not for the first time publicly. I'd like to thank Councillor Rich Lehman for his efforts in what he has done to try and address many of the issues that we've all been suffering from, post bags full and full and full, from residents who have had a far, far less than satisfactory service. Yes, a bond review is quite important, and I would implore all of you to get involved just as soon as you're able to. I share your fears about what's happening internationally right now. It really, really is a scary time, and not just for our futures, but the futures of our children and grandchildren. That's what really does concern me. I'd like to thank Councillor Perkins for highlighting Black History Month, and also for highlighting the Dementia Awareness Day. Again, there's enough width in the leader statement for you to bring that in. And of course, I absolutely welcome that, being a dementia champion myself, as I am, and having had family members who suffered quite seriously from that. Antisocial behaviour at the Meads, Councillor Hunt, I absolutely agree, and that's why I said in my statement about the fact we just need this to be rolled out wider and wider across the borough. It's not just Sittingbourne, it's in some of the more rural areas too. So it's in areas that perhaps you wouldn't think that we have these issues. But in terms of community safety briefings, there is a briefing on the members' training plan. And I will push to get a date for that, so that's resolved, and that that plan is available if you'd like to just do a fact check on me that it is there, but it actually is. I hear Councillor Bonney, and her experience when she came to was absolutely horrendous. To hear somebody that's come out of a doctor's surgery, and generally Councillor Gold might have a different view, but I'm sure he doesn't, people that are going in there are going there because they aren't particularly well, or there's something, you know, perhaps potentially seriously wrong with them. But for them to come out and get attacked by a group of youngsters, probably no more than 13 years old, is absolutely shocking and abhorrent, literally in the highest. So on that note, I'll sit down. Thank you all very much indeed for your responses. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Our next item on the agenda is item 10, motion on Seashells Children's Centre. Councillor Elliot Jays, I'm going to invite you in here. I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway because I think there might be a slight change to the wording if everyone's agreed. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'd like to amend the motion. It should now say, this council calls upon Kent County Council to not cut services and or funding from Seashells Children's Centre.
Is the meeting happy to agree to that change in the wording? Wonderful stuff. So, Councillor Jays, I will invite you to introduce the motion. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion should not need bringing here, but yet again, our borough is under attack from the KCC cutting scissors, which seems to fall far too often upon Sheppey and indeed the wider borough. But rather than talk about the politics of this, I want to talk about the future, the children of our borough. Sheerness Wold is one of the most deprived areas in the country, not just Kent, but the country. According to the Index of Multiple Deprivation 2019, Sheerness is the most deprived ward in Kent. This is taken from from KCC's own website. The NEAT level in Sheerness is at 35%. At a time when this Borough Council is working in partnership with East Kent College and indeed the government to improve the future for the children of Sheppey through Levelling Up and the Junior College, not to mention the 2 new secondary schools we now have serving this island. KCC are looking to cut children's services. This is so short-sighted and not giving the children the best start and chance in the future. This is like kicking the legs out from under the island just as things are looking up. The consultation is to cut services. Let's not dress this up or have this spun. This is a cut to services. This is a cut to our children's future, some of the most deprived in the country. The centre is a lifeline for families, for the parents and for the children. Our own Deputy Prime Minister in an interview said without Sure Start she wouldn't be where she is today. I want to see residents of the island and indeed this borough aim high and reach their full potential. A former Children's Commissioner for England has written to KCC's leader to condemn these cuts. Let that sink in. A former government-appointed Children's Commissioner is condemning these cuts. These cuts will cost KCC more in the long run, but we're used to short-sightedness when it comes to KCC's decision-making. Last year, 2,000 different children across Sheppey were reached by this children's centre. I bet KCC wishes some of its in-house children's centres could reach that many children. Seashells Children's Centre were the first and are still the only Department for Education recognised family hub in Kent. It costs KCC £47 per client contact in Swale. That's compared to £10 for every contact with Seashells. KCC would need to spend £1.7 million to sustain the level of services in Swale by removing this funding. That is £1 million more than they propose to spend in the borough on all children's services. Sheppey Gateway is not a family hub, nor will it be. It'll be an outreach venue. The only family hub will be in Laysdown, which is not accessible by foot and is many miles from Sheerness, and the bus service has already been cut to Laysdown. Laysdown will not offer a majority of services and is currently open 1 day a week. Sheppey Gateway was designed for adult services and as a library. There is no outside space for children's play and development. There is no dedicated free parking for family. It has poor access for buggies beyond the ground floor and no buggy park. There are safeguarding concerns here. The open plan design, other adult client groups mixing with families, the mobile phone policy that children's centres have, and the automatic doors that open out onto the high street, which is a busy road. KCC will save 0.39% through this of their saving targets with this cut, but at what cost? Our children's future is the cost. KCC are asking the largest group of disadvantaged children in Kent to pay for this. It will end up costing KCC more due to the impact of fragmentation and loss of services. This isn't about finding the services people want and need, or providing the best value for money, or utilising community assets designed to deliver these services, or protecting the flagship provision that has been integral to the development of family hub services. Ensuring resilience in time of emergency and giving children of Sheppey the best start in life. If councillors aren't standing for election to make Swale a better place for the future and for the next generation, then what the hell were we elected to do?
Thank you, Councillor Jays. I'll ask Councillor Worcester, would you like to second the motion, and would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll second, Mr Mayor, and reserve my right, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I will open up to debate, and I've got Councillor Harrison. Oh, okay. So we've got Councillor Nundy, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Lehman, Councillor Perkin, Councillor Winkless, and Councillor MacDonald, Councillor Gould. Am I just going to list the ones that aren't wanting to speak on this one? Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to reiterate some of the points that Councillor Jays has made, the Isle of Sheppey is an area of deprivation, and 2 in 5 children that live in Sheerness live in poverty, which is an absolutely horrendous statistic to actually have to read out. And even more horrendous to read it out because KCC are trying to cut these funds. It's going to have a really detrimental impact on the island. It's going to have a really detrimental impact on young families, single parents, disabled parents and disabled children. A few weeks ago I attended the Stroll for Seashells, which went from Sheerness up to Minster, and spoke to quite a few of the current service users and some of the staff that work at Seashells. What became apparent was not only the breadth of services that they offer, but also the depth of impact that these services have and continue to have. It was a really hot topic at the Sheppey Area Committee meeting in September, and there was a unanimous display of support for Seashells and utter contempt towards KCC for even considering this. And on a more personal note, when my partner split up from her ex, she became a single mum with a 5-week-old baby. Seashells were a lifeline for her. It was a safe space that she could go and get supplies that she needed to help raise her daughter. And 16 years later, Seashells are still there for the people of Sheerness, and they're still supporting people in similar situations. And I think it's a total disgrace that these services could be cut. But as usual, the administration at KCC don't care about the Isle of Sheppey. They don't care about young families, and they don't care about people in need. Please support the motion.
I'll come to the ward councillors. I'll go for Councillor Harrison and then Councillor Braun, if I may. Councillor Harrison.
I am absolutely passionate about Seashells. I was at Seashells when it was a pile of mud. Well, actually, I was inside. Gordon Brown was out there in the pouring rain digging that first sod. So, you know, I've been involved for very many years. Cast your mind back to the comments made during the leader's statement about the antisocial behaviour, about the youths. Short-term cuts have long-term consequences. I know that Kent County Council is in a very, very difficult position. The 114 notice is probably a bit nearer to you than it is to us. However, you need to look at implications, as we are doing, before cuts. In terms of the youth service, no look at that at all was made, and I know that for a fact. Some of the things which are done over there, I just think, well, who's got a vested interest here? I could give you examples. I know at times when not called councillors, are we? We're Mr. and Mrs. and Miss, have said, well, actually, you know, we could be doing this better and we'd save a bit of money. Don't worry your head, Miss Harrison. You know, we know all about this. And that's the answer that you got when you tried to raise issues about wasting money. And then they come along and say, right, well, we need to save all this money, so here you are. Oh, yeah, and we're going to knock the seashells on the head sign here on the dotted line. I do understand some of the things that happen over there. I do understand, in my personal opinion, some people should have gone during their probationary period, as I am very fond of saying, instead of which they went up and up and up that ladder, promoted well beyond their level of competence. But then you get to this. If you look online at some of the, and Ancha Rayner is one, some of the examples of people who have gone to children's centres, people whose children have gone to children's centres, who have been given a lifeline, and there are single mums who've gone on to get a degree because of the impact that children's centre had on them. It isn't a short-term fix. It was always a long-term project. And we are seeing the benefits on the island in terms of the, those children who had nothing, who've actually, feel pride that they can do things. We've had problems with the schooling over the years. We're finally getting to a stage
3 minutes, Councillor.
If you want to finish your sentence, you can. I am leaning like that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do know the rules, that's why I sat straight down. I was just going to say, we've finally got to a stage where we're getting the secondary education sorted out on the Isle of Sheppey. Fingers and everything else crossed. I think we're finally there. And yet the start in life is just being ripped from beneath the feet of those children and parents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Braun, as you're the other ward member, I'll let you dive in a bit early.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, I have been inundated with emails about this, and frankly, it'd be quicker for me to list services that Seashells do not offer than those they do. But I'd like to share my story with Seashells. As a child newly diagnosed with autism, my appointments were held at the Shore Start Centre there. Through them, I was referred to physiotherapy for hypermobility, to the Orchid Centre in Sittingbourne. Later in my early teens, after having a house fire, it led to me having reduced attendance at school and an isolated support system. And a support worker at Seashells helped me get back out there, socialise. And frankly, the first thing I did as a counsellor was attending an event at Seashells and handing out certificates to volunteers for Volunteers Week, and it's just a place very close to my heart.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. I will try and go in the order that I saw you in, so I do apologise if it's slightly slower than where you actually were. Next up, I've got Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm aware that there's a very long list, and I think a lot of fantastic points have been made. Councillor Jay's opening remarks covered pretty much everything that needed to be said, but it does bear repeating. Councillor Nundy and Councillor Braun have both given fantastic first-hand testimony as to how great and loved this place is on Sheppey, and Councillor Harrison has given comments about the financial management at KCC, which in the past 3 years I've seen firsthand how very short-sighted cuts are made, and it's difficult to know how much that's because of the government cuts of the past decade and a half, and how much it's just because the administration there are not brave enough to think radically in the way that they manage their budget, and just choose to shave off more and more year after year after year without realising that that's not going to bring about any kind of different result. So there's frustration there, and frustration at the way that that is managed, and I hope that next year we might be able to do things differently there. And just to round up, in terms of seeing greater funding to local authorities from central government, I would like to see central government introduce a wealth tax to help, because there's an enormous gap and there's one way to fill that, in my opinion, and that's with the wealth tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I've got Councillor Perkin, then I'll take Councillor Bowen.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Children's centres like Seashells are an absolute cornerstone of early childhood education. Research consistently shows that the early years are critical for brain development. Quality early education helps children develop essential skills including language, social interaction and problem solving. Children's centres offer a structured, engaging environment where kids can learn through play, laying a strong foundation for the future. But it's not just about children. These centres serve as a vital support system for families. Parenting can be joyful and wonderful and brilliant, but it can also be overwhelming and isolating and scary. And many parents benefit from access to resources, advice, and a safe space to talk about how they're doing with their peers and support workers. Despite putting up a good fight, it looks inevitable that we will lose our children's centres in Faversham. I know when I first moved to Faversham, I knew absolutely no one, and the friends that I made at these centres have seen me through so much as a mum, and I'll be forever grateful to have had that experience, and also forever sad that new parents are having that taken away from them. The support I received had such a profound impact on my life that volunteering there led to full-time employment across the children's centres in Swale, including Seashells, as an infant feeding support coordinator and as an early help practitioner. In that time, I spoke to hundreds of families, but predominantly mothers from all walks of life, many who had significant needs. They may have escaped domestic violence through the Freedom Programme, they may have had postnatal depression, they may have needed support with breastfeeding, English may have been their second language, and navigating doctor's appointments and forms was a challenge. But the centre had always somebody on hand that was able to help every single person that came through that door, no matter what had happened to them. There was no judgment, it was a completely open environment to receive support. Children's centres also play a significant role in addressing social inequality by providing affordable services. They help bridge the gap for families from various socio-economic backgrounds, ensuring that every child has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their circumstances. They also provide support with energy and fuel poverty, as well as supporting people who face period poverty so that no one has to go without or struggle on their own. Investing in these facilities is an investment in our collective future. By prioritising early childhood development, we set the stage for healthier, more educated and engaged citizens. We lower NHS costs and we create happier, more attached family units. I'd like to thank Councillor Jays and Councillor Wister for bringing this motion to the Council, and it has mine and the Liberal Democrat group's full support.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Councillor Bowen. I will take yourself, and following that, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I caveat this, that I also applaud the work that all children's centres do, not only in Swale, the length and breadth of the county, but also the entire country. And what I'm about to say in some quarters may go down like a bucket of vomit, quite frankly. But whilst everyone in this chamber, including myself, would not choose to cut funding or to close any facility available to support people, this motion is premature. It's poorly written and factually wrong. It's asking for something that has not been decided on yet. It isn't good practice to say, for example, we don't like the new Ford Capri, other models available, even though it hasn't been released yet or the final design issued. A decision has not been made on this subject, and the Council has already written to KCC in response to the consultation. Quote, Councillor Tim Gibson, leader of the Council, "We are deeply concerned by the current family hub proposals being made by Kent County Council. So myself and other party leaders have written to them to make that clear." A minor point, but that letter should, I question, never have been sent. As far as I know, no committee agreed it, full council didn't agree it, and under a committee system that is what is meant to happen. Any group leader or member can write in response, but that doesn't make it council policy. Maybe some members who were once cabinet members can't quite let that go. The consultation relates to 2 children's centres in Kent, and this motion doesn't reflect that. So does this council think it is potentially okay for the other one to close? But I'm all right, Jack. The consultation also includes the transfer of services to other locations on the island. So if people drive to Seashells, they are equally likely to drive to another location. We have enough to deal with as a council and do not need to add to that by spending time working on an issue that isn't in our remit. It's a consultation without a decision, and we should respond to it when there are proper facts to respond to. So whilst I'm not supportive of closures, this motion as it stands, because of the above, makes it very hard for me to agree to. And I say that truly with a heavy heart. Thank you.
I'll remind members of what I said back at Bear Baking. Respect each other's views and have respect for each other in the chamber, please. I have Councillor MacDonald. I will then come to Councillor Gould. So Councillor MacDonald, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to respond to that, you know, I'm fully in favour of showing KCC for what they are, frankly. And I would, at one time, I would have been a supporter of KCC. We've lost they're not responsible. When my grandfather came to Sheppey to run Sheppey General Hospital, started off with the parishes, but in the 1920s it became Kent County Council, and that went right through to all the local hospitals, all went through to KCC. KCC then, the ambulance service, which is now part of the National Health as well, all of those are funded outside, not by KCC. The police, of course, are separately rated, and the fire service is separately rated, and many of the schools have now gone away. The rot set in Sheppey when, unfortunately, the time when my father was a schoolmaster, KCC decided to reorganise the schools on Sheppey, and we've never got back. You know, they're absolutely appalling, frankly. So anyway, what's happened now is hopefully we're crossing our fingers. Anyway, so it's mismanagement, frankly, on KCC over a long period of time. And I don't say that with any chance of anybody suing me. Right, as I say, on Sheppey, we're quite used to everything being shut and things being taken away. And I think this is one of the last vestiges of something that's doing an incredibly good work for Sheppey. The fact, I mean, it was published that this situation. The gateway, frankly, is completely unsuitable. It would cost an absolute fortune, and I know that as my experience of building. The toilets are not any good, certainly not for children, and very often they're out of order, or several of them are out of order. So KCC have got an awful lot of money to spend. I know they've got to save money, but the rates which we pay to KCC, I think, are way over the top. If KCC can't run the things for Sheppey, then give us the money and we'll run them. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Gould, then I'll go to Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was then going to make one point in response to Councillor Bell. I'll make two. My first point was really picking up on what Councillor Harrison says about short-term cuts having long-term consequences. And this was actually highlighted in the recent Darcy report on the state of the NHS, where almost all the things that he pointed out that actually needed to be done to save the NHS have little to do with the NHS. And Sure Start and these family centres is actually one of the key areas in terms of long-term health for people going forward. And it is very, very short-sighted on education, prison, all sorts of areas, but in particularly health, to cut in this area. The other point was that the leader was being berated for sending something that hadn't been approved by the council, but surely this is what we're doing now, is actually sending that signal on behalf of the whole council in full council session that this is not something that we wish to go forward with. So yeah, here we are, we're doing it. We are actually, as a council, making our views known to KCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. I have Councillor Winklis next, and then I shall head to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's an absolute disgrace that they're even considering shutting this centre down in Sheerness. which has already been said this evening by other members. As we know, one of the biggest deprived areas within Swale. I get round Kent quite a bit. I come from the Maidstone area, my family's in Maidstone. And my observations are in Kent, other areas, but richer areas, a lot of these centres and services are kept open. It comes to the more impoverished areas and they're being earmarked for closure. So I'm totally behind this motion. Thank you very much.
I have now got Councillor Baldock, then Councillor Kavanagh. So, Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this, but then I've heard some things that made me want to speak. I understand not wanting to waste time on things outside our remit. I really do. So I was amazed that the person who suggested that proposed an amendment to a motion totally outside our remit. I just think that if we're going to have these sort of debates, let's at least try and stay consistent. Now, we hear a lot about KCC not having the money and having to make some pretty hard choices. One of those pretty hard choices was to increase the members' allowance earlier this year, and the year before, to a total of nearly 10%. Whilst we, recognising the problems, froze ours. That's over £100,000 that's going to come out of spending somewhere. So let's not say that KCC are being forced into making difficult decisions whilst they're also making easy ones. Let's send it back to them and say, you better start thinking again. This may seem an easy cut. This may seem something that you can just do, and those people, well, they'll get over it, and they probably don't vote for you anyway. But then in 5 years, there'll be impacts, financial impacts, but they probably won't have the money to resolve then either, and we'll be left picking up the pieces. 10 years, 15, 20, these problems don't go away, they get worse. If you don't tackle issues early on, if you don't support people early on, you get bigger problems, more costly problems, both socially and financially in the future. It's bad economics, it's bad social policy, and it's bad for the people. I fully support this motion.
I've got Councillor Kavanagh and then Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over 20 years ago, when my youngest was a toddler, I got involved heavily as a volunteer for Sure Start. I probably spent as many hours a week as I do now as a councillor. And then, as things went on, I worked for them. I got to know the parents, I got to know what difficulties they were experiencing, I got to see them grow, I got to see the children grow. I lived in an area of high deprivation, not Sheerness, but in London. Very, very similar, such a valuable project. I've visited Seychelles when a friend of mine wanted to get an education and healthcare plan for her daughter. We went to see someone there. I went in, I saw how vibrant, how safe people felt, how busy. You can't just move that to another building where people won't feel as safe. And as already has been said, if we don't give these children a good start, where are we going to be? We're talking about antisocial behaviour. This will be nothing to what we'll be expecting in the future. But will KCC pick up the pieces? No, it will be down to us yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Members, you may note that it is supposed to be 30 minutes for motions. We are at the point where we are pretty much there on 30 minutes. I'm going to use my discretion to allow our two remaining speakers, our seconder and proposer, to speak again and then go to the vote, if that's okay. So Councillor Marchington and then Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
all round, everyone's talking the same story about the cuts to the youth. It's right across everywhere, and it's a really bad problem to us all, and we do accept that. Even in Queenborough, in Rushington, with the youth club there that was run by the Brogdale Group, has had a total cut of funding, as you know. We at the Queenborough Town Council have taken on their rent costs on ourselves, and we're also doing their travel expenses and bits and pieces, and other funding needs to be found. But we're already having to step up and use our own precept to help fund some of the youth. And this is what's going to have to happen everywhere. And if Seashell is under the threat, it's obviously up against a funding problem there. We must also try to assist in getting funding to keep it going. And not only this one, but all the others as much as we can, because it is critical to the future. It's the future of our complete country. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshington. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't agree with the children's centres being cut. I don't. But one thing that I think will make a big difference everywhere is if we stop telling children they are deprived. Why? Why are we telling them? Just because my child lives in Laysdown or everywhere, that doesn't make them deprived. Because they're not in an affluent area, they can do what any other child can do. I was brought up in an area of deprivation in London, but I was told by my parents and everyone, you can do what you put your mind to, you can do what you know. So let's not keep going on about the children in Sheerness, the children on the island, the children. Yes, they may be in a deprived area, but that does not make the children deprived. Let's encourage our children in our area, and say, you can do what you put your mind to. Just because where you live is lower than somewhere else, it doesn't mean it is you. So let's remember that when we're talking about the children and everyone. They may be in an area that's deprived, but they are not deprived. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Shill, I've said that we'll take these to the final. We've already overrun, so I will ask Councillor Worcester if she would like to use her reserved right to speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm angry, I'm passionate. Everybody in this room should be angry and passionate about this subject. What on earth are we doing if we're looking at these KCC consultations and saying, well done, good effort. 73 pence in the council tax pound is paid to KCC. What for, if not for the benefit of the vulnerable, the benefit of people that need that support, and is being taken away? Disgraceful, shameful. I will stick by those words, and I'm happy to be quoted on those. I'm not going to speak to you tonight. I'm just going to share a few comments from Jim Duncan, the person who runs Seashells, the person who runs an outstanding provision for those children, for children from 0 to 19 years old. The very successful chair for 10 years of Rose Street Primary School that neighbours Seashells. And where do you think those problems are going to go when Seashells has their services restricted? Straight back onto other budgets, including primary schools. So Seashells as a flagship centre for KCC, we have always tried to go above and beyond what we can do for families, continuing operating within government guidelines. We were the first to reopen after COVID, exactly in line with government guidance. The letter from KCC confirming the end of our contract date acknowledges your work to support children and young people during COVID pandemic was outstanding. The last two Ofsted and CQC reports that have come back for KCC are not so. Yet they think that they can dictate how best Sheppey runs for its young people. I don't think so. If you're under any illusions about this consultation being misleading, there's been multiple opportunities to visit the site, and many of the local councillors have done. Thank you very much for that. Jim, Kate, Ian, all of the workers down there have been available to speak to every day, like they are all the time, in a safe environment for children and families to speak to. Emphasis on consistency and a district approach. That is what KCC are looking for here. Absolutely wrong. Sheerness is the most deprived area in Kent. Therefore, what we need to look at is a needs provision for that area. Has that discussion been had with KCC? Who knows? I know Millmead's councillor has had that discussion with KCC, their KCC councillor. Has that happened from Sheppey KCC councillors? Who knows? And that's the problem here. Communication, support from KCC to Sheppey, to all areas of Sheppey, is poor, and our representation is poor. It needs to be better. On the 21st of November, KCC are having their meeting to discuss this. We've got a coach, families, staff, councillors, you're all invited. Come along, look at those KCC councillors in the eye
3 minutes,
and say,
Councillor.
absolutely, make your decision, but you say that decision to those people that are affected, not in private, not out the back door, to those people that are going to be affected. Their council tax matters and their children matter every single time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to the majority of members. I too joined Councillor Nundy on the stroll and actually took part in the stroll and wasn't just there for the photo opportunity. I'd like to thank Councillor Baldock for your comments. I agree that the members' allowance should be the alternative to find this saving. KCC spends £2.11 million on members' allowance, and that should be the first target for cuts instead of voting year on year for an increase in their own interests. It's a shame the Conservative leader wants to play politics with this. His speech seems to refer to the motion before it was amended. I wonder if his colleagues at KCC wrote it for him. I disagree with the last member's opinion to ignore reality.
Mr Mayor, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Agreed.
We can. Wonderful stuff. Councillor Baldock.
For.
Councillor Bonney has had to leave. Councillor Booth.
For.
Councillor Bowen.
Surprisingly, actually, 4.
Councillor Braun.
4.
Councillor Carnell.
4.
Councillor Kavanagh.
4.
Councillor Chapman.
4.
Councillor Cheeseman.
4.
Councillor Roger Clark. Simon unfortunately cannot vote on this one, but I'm sure he would be if he was in the chamber. Councillor Eyre.
4.
Councillor Charles Gibson.
4.
Councillor Tim Gibson.
Absolutely 4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Harrison.
4.
Councillor Hunt.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Jays.
4.
Councillor Last. 4. Councillor Lehman.
A child aged between 0 and 10 in a deprived area is 3 times more likely to die than a child in a well-off area, regardless of whether they're told they're deprived or not. 4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Marchington. 4. Me. 4. Councillor Claire Martin.
4.
Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Moore. 4. Councillor Neal.
4.
Councillor No.
4.
Councillor Nundy.
4.
Councillor Chris Palmer.
4.
Councillor Richard Palmer.
4.
Councillor Perkin.
4.
Councillor Shield.
4.
Councillor Speed.
4.
Councillor Paul Stephen.
4.
Councillor Sarah Stephen.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Tucker. He's not here. Councillor Vowles.
4.
Councillor Watson.
4.
Councillor Worcester.
For our kids, our families, always 4.
Councillor Winklis.
4.
And Councillor Wise. I don't think we need to go through that for me to say that was a unanimous vote, ladies and gents. Before we take the next motion, I propose we take a 10-minute break because I think we've all been looking at the screens a bit long, so do bear in mind. Back in 10 minutes, please. That will be 55.
He soon changed his tune. I might talk for the
Thank you.
It wasn't actually on the recording, it was outside this finish meeting, it wasn't, so whether that's why they weren't actually delayed by Parliament, but they were, that's the free news with failings. Oh right, well maybe that makes more sense. So they, yes, they weren't actually, but obviously we tried to do a lot because, yeah, you never know who's going to be there if you talk.
There were lights, and now there aren't any lights. That's the light. Yes, the happy looking machine. Yeah. In the post-time It says it's on 3.
That way, it's all yours. Except there's 2 alley doors. Not realising
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah.
You've been busy?
Yeah.
How are you doing for your knees?
Yeah.
Please be seated, members. And if you want to remove jackets or anything, do feel free, because it is getting a bit warm in here again. I hope you've come back refreshed. So our next item is item 11, which is another motion. There is a 30-minute time limit on this one. We are going to the winter fuel motion, so I will ask Councillor Hannah Perkin to propose the motion. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've just put a sweet in my face, so that's awkward. So first, before I start, I just wanted to make clear that there was an amendment submitted by Councillors Bowen and Speed, which contains some minor changes to the motion, which myself and Councillor Gibson have accepted as substantive. So the substantive motion that is being presented includes those amendments. Okay. Shortly after the Chancellor announced the policy to make winter fuel allowances mean tested on the 16th of September, Aged Concern launched a petition opposing it. The charity sector is so often the voice for members of our community that are the most vulnerable, and it also has an in-depth knowledge of how the people they support live their lives, the problems that they face and the day-to-day struggle that so many people are contending with as we continue to face a cost of living crisis which is still biting at so many people's heels. This October, the energy price cap is likely to rise 10% and stay high across the winter, leaving most energy bills nearly double those pre-crisis at levels unaffordable to millions of people. Aged Concern estimate that 2.5 million pensioners who badly need the money to be able to stay warm this winter will not receive the fuel payment. They are particularly concerned about those on low incomes that just missed out on the pension credit threshold, which can be missed out by as little as £1. The 800,000 people that don't receive pension credit even though they are eligible for. If the government do not change track, they will have a huge moral imperative to ensure that these people are informed, educated and helped through the process. And those who have unavoidably high energy needs because of disability or illness. Just this week, I spoke to a resident who relies on a lot of electrical appliances to help her do tasks that most of us take for granted. Standing up from sitting down, getting up the stairs, getting in and out of the bath, even sleeping safely. The government has admitted that it has not done an equality impact assessment to run alongside this policy. In not doing this, they have frankly swept the reality of thousands of other disabled and sick people under the rug. I understand that the new Labour government has inherited a huge financial issue. I'm not going to stand here and say that everyone needs the winter fuel allowance, but I'm also going to stand here for the people that this cruel policy will impact. It is the wrong choice, rushed through with next to no adjustment time in the face of a November energy price hikes and some of the most expensive day-to-day survival costs for decades. I know there are good Labour councillors in this chamber that know in their hearts that this is a dreadful policy, and I hope that they will support the motion regardless of their National Party affiliation and show that they are undeniably on the side of our residents. I therefore propose the following. Council notes that the recent announcement by the Labour government to end universal winter fuel payments and restrict eligibility to only those in receipt of pension credits and other benefits. Though many agree that universal winter fuel payments are not necessary, Council is deeply concerned that many pensioners on lower and middle incomes will now not receive the payments. Across England and Wales, the number of people eligible for winter fuel payments will fall by 10 million, from 11.4 million to only 1.5 million. In Swale, the number of pensioners affected by the change in eligibility criteria is 24,056. That means 88.5% of pensioners currently eligible for the winter fuel payments will no longer be able to claim the payment from this winter onwards. Council believes that the Labour government has set the threshold at which pensioners do not qualify for winter fuel payments far too low. Only those receiving a pension of less than £218 a week or £332.95 a week for couples are eligible for pension credits. This is significantly lower than the living wage. Council is also concerned by the low take-up of pension credit, with almost 63% of those eligible nationwide receiving them, and over 880,000 pensioners not doing so. Council recognises the role we have to play in increasing awareness of benefits such as pension credit to ensure people are aware of the support that they are entitled to. Council further notes that the energy cap price is due to raise 10% in October, which combined by the removal of the winter fuel payments will push thousands of local pensioners into fuel poverty. Council resolves to Instruct the leader to write on behalf of the Council to the Chancellor of Exchequer calling for the policy on linking winter fuel payments to pension credit receipt to be immediately paused and reviewed, to introduce a new threshold to determine eligibility for winter fuel payments, and asking for the release of the equality impact assessment that accompanies the policy. Council further requests the leader to write on behalf of the Council to all MPs covering Swale, asking them to give their formal support to halting the changes to the winter fuel payment eligibility. And the Council urgently commences a significant awareness campaign to maximise uptake of the pension credits. This will include use of Council notice boards, social media, promotion in local press, and also targeted letters to those who may be eligible. We have heard in this chamber this evening a lot of people rightly stand up for the rights of our young people and our children. I hope that we also hear people that are going to stand up for the rights of our elderly. Thank you very much, and I present this motion to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. I ask Councillor Charles Gibson to second the motion and ask if you wish to speak now or reserve your right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to second and reserve my right.
A further amendment has been received, proposed by Councillor Harrison and seconded by Councillor Wise. This was outside the deadline and I have accepted the amendment. Copies of the amendment should have been tabled. I hope everyone's had a chance to have a look at it. Councillor Harrison, I will invite you to propose the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our amendment is scrub what was there. Request all group leaders within Swale sign a joint letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer calling for the new winter fuel payment policy to be suspended and reviewed. Continue a significant awareness campaign to maximise uptake of pension credits. This will include use of council notice boards, social media promotion in local press, and also targeted letters to those who may be eligible. Our feeling was that we would like a cross-party missive to go from this council. We felt that all group leaders, so that it was cross-party, should sign a letter to the Chancellor. MPs have had their say. It is now down to the Chancellor. We do feel that there should be a pause and a review. Frankly, I think it should have been done years ago. The more I read about it, the pound difference is appalling. People living abroad get the winter fuel allowance. In whose name? I just think there are so many things that need reviewing about it. So that was what we were trying to do, cross-party. The final paragraph, though, I was ashamed at members of this council that clearly don't read their emails, clearly don't read their social media, because this council has been promoting pension credit for some time. And when this announcement was made, the staff at this council upped their promotion of the pension credit that's out there. You will know, well, maybe not people who came in May 23, but those who were here before, you will know that this council has a programme, I think it's Policy and Practice, where we've got this database where you can target people of a certain age and contact them and see if they, do you think you might be eligible for pension credit? Let's talk about it. So actually targeting individuals in streets. And we've been doing that work for some time. So I'm really, really ashamed that people don't seem to have tuned in or remember reading the stuff. And that is why we put down continue, not commence. Because it has been going on for some time. Our staff have been working their socks off on it. And what do you think those one Swale road shows were all about? But actually targeting people who are in need and making sure that they get what they're entitled to, or at least know what they're entitled to and can take it up. So I do appreciate you allowing me to move this motion, this amendment, Mr. Mayor. It was put in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I will now call on Councillor Wise. I invite you to second the amendment. And do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I reserve my right.
Thank you. You are still seconding, though, yeah? Thank you. We just had to confirm that. Right, so the debate at the moment is on the amendment, not the motion. I've got Councillor Bowen. Councillor Baldock, did you want to speak on the amendment as well? Councillor Lundy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, how to try to water down and in doing so totally weaken a motion that says this council says no to the cut in the winter fuel allowance. This is a clear example of the Labour group not wanting to stand up for Swale and say to Sir Keir and Rachel that this is wrong, but tone it down into a, please sir, it's not us, but all these people asking for you to check your work in. No. Some might appreciate this bit. As Spider-Man's Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility. The Labour group lead this council, and this council wants to respond as a council, not cross-party. Cross-council is far better, in my view, as it has more gravitas. So if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, as you don't get to pick and choose what you like and those that you see as an issue that puts you in conflict with your lords and masters. Members, if you represent your residents, do not vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Before we continue, Councillor Harrison mentioned the policy and practice documentation, which means I have to declare an interest because I work alongside that within the housing association that I work for. So policy and practice, it's non-pecuniary because I'm not directly on it, but as part of my job covers that now.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. I should have said something vaguer.
That's okay. Zentura, policy and practice, it all feeds in. So I've got Councillor Baldock, then Councillor Nundy, and just while I remember and have the microphone still open, I will ask Councillor Perkin as the proposer if you wish to exercise your right and do a reply on the debate at the end of the amendment. Thank you. So, Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bit divided on this because I quite liked the idea of all the group leaders also writing a letter, but that's been removed from the substantive motion and now comes back in an amendment. So that bit I like. What I don't like is removal of all the explanation and all the points before it. And what I don't like is the important bit that we speak, as Councillor Bowen said, as a council through our leader. That is what carries the weight. So a joint letter would have been nice in addition, but I can't support an amendment that takes away the crux of the matter, which is this council speaking with one voice, speaking through the leader. So I don't support the amendment on that basis, but I do think, and I don't know if this is within your gift, Mr. Mayor, I think there's probably support for using the word continue rather than commence, as it reflects the accuracy. And if, I don't know who makes these decisions, but if the council is willing to adopt continue rather than commence, then I would be happy to support that bit. But the amendment per se, I could not support. We do need a letter that unites us all through the leader as a council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I'm just going to take a little bit of advice on this one. We think we've got a way through on that one, so we'll come to that when we go back to the substantive. Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I think before I speak, Councillor MacDonald needs to raise something, so I'll let him.
Yeah, as an old age pensioner, of course, I've got to declare an interest, but even though I wouldn't, I'm so sorry, yes, I wouldn't qualify, but there we go. But I'd better declare an interest. Thank you.
I'll ask now, and I'm really sorry, guys. Would anybody who qualifies for winter fuel payments just raise your hands so that we can just pop you down as declaring an interest? Sorry.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, members, because you are no more or less affected than any pensioner who may or may not be in receipt of the winter fuel allowance, then it doesn't actually fetter your discretion. You can take part in the debate and you can vote.
Excellent. There we go. Right, Councillor Nundy, shall we try again?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just perhaps this is my naivety, but just to be absolutely clear before I say anything, the amended motion is just what's written on that piece of paper. Right, okay, in which case I would urge all councillors to vote against the amendment, because I think it misses out quite a crucial point that Councillor Perkin and Councillor Gibson have raised, and obviously I appreciate that Councillor Bowen also put an amendment into it, but about asking for a new threshold to determine eligibility for winter fuel payments, and also asking for the release of the Equalities Impact Assessment. I think that is absolutely vital to this motion, and so I would urge all members to vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor. I think the proposer and the seconder are thinking that the amendment doesn't replace the original. Could we just have that clarified, please?
So, members, as it stands at the moment, you are debating an amendment. If the amendment, when you move to the vote on it, falls, then you will go back to the substantive. Is that the point being made?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for you. The sheet of paper that we have, a very short piece of paper, is that a replacement of just the second half of the amendment, or is that the entirety of the amendment? That's what I think we need clarifying.
So I think, if I'm right in understanding you, you're just asking whether that replaces everything from council resolves to, or whether it replaces the whole lot, which was my understanding.
Yes, that's what I proposed in the second.
So
Mr. Mayor, that's more or less what was. There were 4 bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4. We were amending the 4 bullet points to make it 2. All this is still part of the motion. You know, the 332.95 a week, the energy price cap rising by 10%, all that's there. It was the bullet points that we were amending. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's the amendment. You're still debating the amendment as proposed.
Yeah. So I'm just going to check that all members are clear on that. So the proposer and seconder are stating outright that it is only the bullet points under council resolves that they were looking to amend. Everything before that remains the same. There we go. So we all know why we're debating. Was there anybody else that wishes to speak on the amendment before I go to Councillor Perkin? Councillor Perkin.
Thanks. I mean, I think there probably is wide agreement that we could look at a different word to commence. I'd be happy to discuss that. I think maybe upscale would be better than continue, because I do think we need to be reactive to it. It is a change. It's a significant change of circumstances. If we could have a discussion about whether everyone would get on board with that, that would be great. I don't accept that we need to get rid of the other 2. I think that there is accountability that needs to be had from the Labour government, and I think that actually telling them they've made a decision that impacts our residents negatively is important as a council. We've definitely done that to the Conservatives, so we definitely shouldn't change how we work in that respect. So I would be open to a discussion about the change of the word, but I would not be open to a discussion about the other 2 amendments, and I would urge people to vote against that.
Councillor Wise, you reserved your right, so if you would like to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our group is in agreement that this does need to be reviewed. It does need to be paused and reviewed. We are in agreement that the current threshold proposed, the current way of means testing this, needs to be and ought to be reviewed. And whilst Councillor Bowen quoted Spider-Man, I'll quote him. We are better when we work as one, which is why we hoped that a letter showing the support cross-party, as we have done several times since I've been in this chamber, including on GPs and other important provisions that matter to our residents. I think he's doing himself down by saying that his name being included on it means it doesn't carry as much gravitas as if it's just the leader of the council. And I think as far as accountability goes, by going directly to the Chancellor as this amendment proposes, as my colleague Councillor Harrison said, MPs have already had their say. We want to go direct to the Chancellor, speaking across party here in this chamber to say, pause this, review it. It's been rushed through. Let's pause a moment and come up with something better, as spelled out in the substantial part of the motion before resolves. We're in total agreement with that. So I second this motion and I should urge all members to please get behind this amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I request a recorded vote on this amendment, please?
Lovely. Right, so this is just on the amendment. Councillor Baldock.
Against.
Councillor Polly's gone home. Councillor Booth.
Against.
Councillor Bowen.
Against.
Councillor Braun.
For.
Councillor Carnell.
Against.
Councillor Kavanagh.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Cheeseman.
For.
Councillor Roger Clark.
Against.
Councillor Eyre.
Against.
Councillor Charles Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Tim Gibson.
For.
Councillor Gould.
Against.
Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Jays.
Against.
Councillor Last. Councillor Lehman.
Against.
Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor Marchington. Councillor Claire Martin.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Moore. Councillor Neal. Councillor No. Councillor Nundi.
Against.
Councillor Chris Palmer.
Against.
Councillor Richard Palmer.
Against.
Councillor Perkin.
Against.
Councillor Shield.
For.
Councillor Speed.
Against.
Councillor Paul Stephen.
Against.
Councillor Sarah Stephen.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Tucker is online. Councillor Vowles.
For.
Councillor Watson.
For.
Councillor Worcester.
For.
Councillor Winkless.
For.
And Councillor Wise. And myself will be against. Where are we? There's my name there. The amendment has fallen. I will just grab the numbers for you, but I'm pretty certain that you can guess the numbers, give or take. And please try and be nice to Councillor Watson with all these recorded votes. There's virtually no voice left. Obviously a good conference. Right, so the amendment has fallen. We've got our maths wizards on it. We're going to be back to the substantive. I've got Councillor Baldock, then yourself, Councillor Lehman, on that one. Sorry. 13 in favour, 27 against was the scores on the doors there. Right, so we're going onwards. Councillor Baldock, you wish to speak on the substantive?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an interesting proposal to cut winter fuel allowance because it was in the 2017 Conservative manifesto. And the Conservatives all supported and campaigned on that manifesto to cut the winter fuel allowance. Labour described it as very bad. And John McDonnell, who I have a lot of time for, highlighted the impacts it would cause in the deaths of pensioners. 7 years later, those who said it was bad are now doing it. And those who proposed to do it 7 years ago are saying it's bad. And that just makes you wonder, when does everybody flip? When does that little switch go, oh, I think it's good now, I think it's bad now? Let's face it, it was always bad. It was bad when it was proposed in 2017, and it's bad proposed now. 85% of pensioners likely to lose their winter fuel allowance. Do we think that 85% of pensioners are well off? I don't think so. We're told the most vulnerable in society, the most vulnerable pensioners will still receive it. What about the not quite so vulnerable? A little bit vulnerable, but not quite vulnerable enough. No vulnerable person should be the target of cost-cutting measures like this, especially not when there are so many better and more obvious ways, and I believe Councillor Lehman made reference to one of them earlier. There are so many different ways to tackle the black hole in our nation's finances. Not a black hole that we didn't know about before the election, because we did. But we didn't hear about plans during the election, how it was going to be filled. I wonder if they'd said, if the incoming government had said, well, one of the first things we're going to do is cut your winter fuel allowance. Don't think that majority might have been quite so big. Certainly here in Sittingbourne and Sheppey, it might have been very different. And that's why it's important that we write to our MPs. Let our MPs know how we as a council feel about the decisions and votes they make. They're not in isolation, they're with us and with the people out there, the pensioners and the people who are impacted by the decisions they make. So that's why it's important that we are still writing to the MPs. I think this is an atrocious measure. Whoever took it, whether it was from one party or the other, it would always have stood as an atrocious move. I'm glad this council, I'm pretty sure of it, is going to be united in sending a clear, strong message. Think again, don't do it, this is wrong.
You timed that, didn't you? Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Echoing Councillor Wise's words about being better when we work together, I would like to propose an amendment which incorporates Councillor Perkin and Councillor Gibson's original motion, Councillor Bowen and Councillor Speed's amendment to that motion, which was the substantive motion at the start of this debate, and a soupçon of Councillor Harrison and Councillor Wise's amendment. Do you want me to read out my amendment? It'll be shorter than the introduction.
So, there's no, if you propose it, whether everyone seconds it or not, isn't it? So they often don't want to debate on the substantive motion. And it might be, if he's just basically asking...
It's better than that.
I need to know what it says before I can decide how we proceed.
Well, that's
so
why
is it any... Yeah, fire away.
I mean, in short, it's just tidying it up a bit and the punctuation, but then also an important change to the final bullet point. So, Council resolves to, 1, instruct the leader to write on behalf of the Council to the Chancellor of the Exchequer calling for the policy linking winter fuel payments to pension credit receipt to be immediately paused and reviewed, the introduction of a new threshold to determine eligibility for winter fuel payments, an equalities impact assessment to be undertaken. 2. Request the leader to write on behalf of the council to all MPs covering Swale, asking for their formal support in halting the changes to winter fuel payment eligibility. 3. Increase our ongoing awareness campaigns to maximise uptake of pension credits, including the use of council notice boards, social media, promotion in local press and targeted letters to those who may be eligible. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, and members, if the proposer and seconder of the original motion would like to alter their motion, having heard that, then they could do that with the agreement of the meeting just given by assent.
Yes, that's fine.
Other meeting happy to accept that? Excellent. There's not enough of you to stand up, so it's okay. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification in terms of what was just said. The member said undertake an equalities impact assessment, if memory serves. Yeah. That's already been done.
Councillor Perkins said it hadn't.
No, it hasn't.
But they've hidden it.
They've released that they haven't done one.
No. Right, I'll withdraw that. Thank you.
So we're back to the substantive. Did you want to speak on the substantive, or do you want to? Sorry? The new substantive, yes. You did indicate, Councillor Bowen, did you want to speak on the... We're now on the substantive motion again. So you were next up. Excellent. It's over to you.
Have we agreed the amendment?
We have. We did it through the word agreement.
Thank you. I blinked and missed. It's a cruel policy. He deserves to reverse it. And I'd like him to say that he's made a misstep and reversed the policy. Sharon Graham, Unite General Secretary. There is nothing responsible about leaving the profits of private equity and investors untouched, whilst working people are asked to balance the books with their paychecks and benefits. Alan Tate, CWU. We strongly oppose the means testing the winter fuel payment because our initial estimate is that as many as 2 million pensioners who badly need the money to stay warm this winter will not receive it and will be in trouble as a result. Yet at the other end of the spectrum, well-off older people will scarcely notice the difference. A social injustice. Caroline Abrams, Charity Director at Age UK. And there are many, many more quotes criticising this policy. The winter fuel allowance is a lifeline for many people who are often on fixed incomes and have limited ability to increase their earnings. For these individuals, energy costs take up a large portion of their budgets. The elderly are particularly vulnerable to cold weather, with winter deaths and illnesses rising as temperatures fall. Cutting this allowance puts them at risk of fuel poverty, forcing them to choose between heating their homes or buying essentials like food and medication. This cut contradicts the government's stated commitments to protecting the most vulnerable. While Labour has promised to tackle inequality and invest in social well-being, slashing a benefit that directly addresses a basic need, staying warm in winter, undermines those values. But there is also a twist in this short-sighted decision to cut the winter fuel payment. Research from Policy and Practice, a consultancy working with local authorities, suggests that the extra amount the Treasury had expected to spend on pension credit could be hit as soon as this week. On current trends, the analysis suggests there could be 158,000 more claims than anticipated by the pension credit deadline in late December, costing an extra £246 million. However, because claiming pension credit also opens up a series of other benefits for those claimants, the total cost could be up to £700 million more than expected. Reducing the winter fuel allowance could have a broader economic and social consequence. Increased fuel poverty can lead to higher healthcare costs as more people suffer from cold-related illnesses. It places additional strain on the NHS during an already difficult winter period and can reduce productivity if people struggle to stay healthy. So while Sir Keir and co sit nice and warm in their offices and homes paid for by the taxpayer, wearing clothes donated by them and to them and their families, going on holiday and staying in flats paid for by donations, going to watch football matches and sending family members to live elsewhere, reaping in thousands of pounds, and yet they are quite happy to push those who are an immensely valuable part of this community into even greater poverty and not listen to their own members, their own conference decisions, their trade unions or anyone else. Members, please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. We've now got Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Perkin and Gibson for bringing this motion. It's absolutely important. And actually, just to go back to something I think it was Councillor Perkin said earlier on another motion, is that this is going to have a really detrimental impact on people, particularly people with low incomes. Who's going to plug that gap? Because if the government aren't going to plug it, which is their responsibility to look after their citizens, it will be put onto local charities and local organisations to do it. But by doing that, what will then happen is those charities that are there to target, the really absolutely most vulnerable people will now have to spread their services so thin that they won't be able to cope with it. And I think that's an absolute disgrace. So please support the motion.
Councillor Palmer. Richard.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this being brought to the table. It's a good motion. I will be supporting it. I believe Councillor Harrison said short-term cuts have implications. Ill thought-out cuts have also implications. And I've dealt with the implications of what's likely to occur with these cuts. I used to be in the ambulance service. It's absolutely horrible at times going into an elderly person's house. Freezing cold. They're either dead, in bed, or sitting in a chair with little food and no heating. That was in the 80s and the early 90s during the Conservative governments. I never thought I would see a Conservative government taking such a mean, vindictive... Sorry, it's sometimes very hard to tell National Labour from the Conservatives now. In fact, I would say Keir has gone far worse than the Conservatives ever have. I think National Labour are letting local Labour down. And I hope local Labour will bear that in mind, because you could take the easy option and support your party. You could take the difficult decision and show that you support your residents, that you feel this is an ill thought out policy, and you can vote for this motion. Or you can take the other easy route and just abstain. But you will send a clear message to your residents tonight of how you feel National Labour have got it so wrong. Whether it's right or wrong, there's political decisions to be made. You can send billions of pounds to Ukraine for war. You can send billions of pounds to Africa. You can send billions of pounds all over the place. You can spend billions on pay rises. They are political decisions. And this was a political decision that no one saw coming. And in the run-up to the election, on the 1st of October, gas and electric prices have gone up 10%. We were promised that wouldn't happen with Conservative Keir. You're being let down. If you don't support this motion, you're sending a very clear message to your residents. Thank you.
Councillor Gibson, quite a while ago you reserved your right to speak as seconder. Would you like to utilise it now? Oh, hang on. I've got Councillor Harrison wishing to come in. I will take that and then come to you, Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did try to have a cross-party. You know, we all agree that it was a mistake. Well, no, not a mistake. Well, it was a mistake, but I'm pretty sure that's not what you'd call it. That, you know, can we all say, look, the cross-party, we all agree that you need to pause it and relook at it. It's not just one group saying it. It's not just the opposition, and we tried to do that. But you've decided you want to have a bash. Well, let me tell you, I've stood here many, many moons ago and spoke about Maggie's annual cull of the elderly for many, many, many moons. There's people in this chamber voted for that. Do you know how many billions of pounds been spent in the last few years and in the current year on Brexit? The costs of Brexit? We are still paying billions for the cost of damn Brexit. know, so let's not start getting holier than bloody thou, because we all agree, we said that, we agree this needs to be paused and you need to review it. I think it should have been reviewed some considerable time ago, but clearly the previous government didn't have the, what's the polite way of putting it? Whatever, cojones, actually. So we would quite happily support something if you said, like, all group leaders will sign to say that it's cross-party, because we agree it wants to be reviewed. But if you're just using it as another, oh, let's have a go at the Labour government, they haven't been here 5 minutes, but let's blame all of the ills on them, we're not going to be having none of it. Thanks.
You get the sum up in a moment anyway, Councillor Perkin. So, Councillor Charles Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Harrison. I had not finished my notes. That was a timely moment to give me some breathing space, so thank you very much for that. Councillor Perkin spoke very eloquently at the beginning, and all contributions have been very valuable, so I'm only going to reiterate some of the great points made throughout. Councillor Baldock is absolutely right. Cutting on the back of the most vulnerable is always wrong, regardless of political party doing it. It is always the wrong choice. Councillor Bowen very kindly pointed out the 2 million potential vulnerable residents who will be excluded from this cut, and that is a shocking, shocking decision. Councillor Nundy very helpfully pointed out that the cuts fall both on the most vulnerable and then again on our charity sector and on our local government sector, placing great strain on an already hugely overworked sector that is doing fantastic things and cannot bear the extra strain that is being forced on it. Councillor Palmer spoke hugely movingly about the horrifying impact that is all too clear, and I thought gave a very rousing and fine call for unity across this chamber, which we would all do well to heed on this occasion and others. Finally, Councillor Harrison, I would call it a mistake. This group would call it a mistake. I think that's absolutely the right word. We're not having a political bash. This group and many councillors across this chamber have been very happy to have a bash, disagree with, argue against decisions and policies, regardless of party affiliation and regardless of where they come from. Wrong decisions can be made by anybody, whatever tie colour you're wearing, and this is one of them. Finally, if some parties in this chamber had lifted a finger to stop the monstrosity of Brexit, maybe we wouldn't be in this colossal mess, but here we are. Nonetheless, thank you very much, everyone, and I implore you to vote for this motion.
Can we have a recorded vote, Mr. Mayor?
Are there 5 of you that want it? There are. Councillor Perkin, we're back to you for summing up of the debate and any responses before we go to the vote.
Thank you. I want to start with the point that Councillor Harrison raised about this just being about having a bash. I'm actually quite saddened by that comment. I think that there is accountability to be had by the Labour government for making this decision, in the same way that if we had stood here and a Conservative government had made this decision, we would be asking them to be held accountable as well. I completely agree with Councillor Baldock's point about the fact that we have to treat all parties equally if they make terrible decisions, and I stand by that. I would do the same to the Liberal Democrats if I thought they made a terrible decision as well, and have done previously in the conference chamber. So overall, I think I personally don't really understand what the Labour Party's position is on this particular motion. They are saying that they agree with it, but then saying they don't want to vote for it because we're asking the leader to do it and not the cross-party consensus of group leaders. As the leader writing is a council decision. It is a cross-party decision because that's democratic. That's democracy. That's how that works in the council chamber. That's how we have our residents' voices spoken to the levers of power. And I just thoroughly hope that everybody supports it. And I'm just quite baffled by some of the comments that have come out this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. We will now move to the recorded vote on the substantive motion. The new substantive motion. Councillor Baldock.
For Brexit, freedom and justice, I vote for.
Councillor Booth.
4.
Councillor Bowen.
4.
Councillor Braun.
4.
Councillor Carnell.
4.
Councillor Kavanagh.
4.
Councillor Cheeseman. She's... Yep. Councillor Roger Clark.
4.
Councillor Eyre.
4.
Councillor Charles Gibson.
4.
Councillor Tim Gibson.
4.
Councillor Gould.
4.
Councillor Harrison.
4.
Councillor Hunt.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
As a trade unionist and a retired member, 4.
Councillor Jays.
4.
Councillor Last. 4. Councillor Lehman.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
If I'm allowed to, 4.
Councillor Marchington. 4. Councillor Claire Martin.
4.
Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Moore. Councillor Neal. Councillor No. Councillor Lundy.
4.
Councillor Chris Palmer.
4.
Councillor Richard Palmer.
4.
Councillor Perkin.
4.
Councillor Shield.
4.
Councillor Speed.
4.
Councillor Stephen Paul.
4.
Councillor Sarah Stephen.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Vowles.
4.
Councillor Watson.
4.
Councillor Worcester.
4, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Winkless.
4.
And Councillor Wise.
4.
Mr Mayor. Oh. You're not on my list. Where have you gone?
2 votes.
He's been crossed out.
Ah, that's why. Councillor Chapman, there we go, that's why I've got the wrong list. You'll be surprised to know that it hasn't made a difference to the vote. It is unanimous.
Mr Mayor, at this point, I think it might be, given that the nature of business left to go, I think it might be worth extending standing orders. I move to 10:30.
Everyone happy? You beat me to it. Thank you. Right, so our next item on the agenda is the item 12, DBS checks for members. I will invite the chair of the Standards Committee, Councillor Wise, to speak and propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In proposing this, I'd like to thank the Housing and Health Committee for bringing this proposal to the Standards Committee. I think when you speaking to residents, I think most of them are surprised that this is not already a requirement that we have for all councils. So I welcome that this has been approved by the Standards Committee for us to go forward with this so that we can help lead by example and show that this is the minimum sort of standard that we should be expecting when people are elected to this place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Where are we? I believe we have Councillor Harrison as the chair of the Housing and Health Committee to second. Would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll second and reserve my right. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, under the Constitution, I propose that we move to the vote. I don't think this is going to be controversial, and we've still got quite a bit to do.
Was there a seconder?
I know, I'd second that.
I have to take a vote and go to the vote. Everyone happy to go to the vote? Yes. Any dissenters? Yes. Yeah, those that don't want to go to the vote yet. Yeah, so we've only got the 4 dissenters there, so I think we're going straight to the vote without debate. So, could I have a show of hands, those in favour of the recommendations, please? Oh, yeah. Schneep, schnatter, schneep, we're unanimous again by the look of things. Anybody against? If you can just, you'll show up a bit clearer. Any abstentions? That was unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We're going to go to item 13, which is review of the current statement of principles under the Gambling Act 2005. Licensing Chair, Councillor Carnell, would you like to propose and speak?
Yes, I propose
Councillor Winkler is the Vice Chair. Would you like to...
I second.
Any sort of...
I reserve my right to speak.
Excellent. Councillor Bowen? Thank you. Councillor Perkin? Anyone else? Show of hands then. I'm assuming you don't want to sum up. No, didn't think so. Right. Do you want to speak, Tony, as you reserved... Sorry, Councillor Winkler, as you reserved your right?
No, thank you.
Right, all those in favour, please raise your hands. I'm just going to do the easy one and say anybody that's against, can you raise?
Andrew's still got a hand up.
Oh.
Against.
Or against a legacy hand.
So,
Any abstentions?
any abstentions? So again, that was unanimous. Right, so we're going to item 14, which is allocation of committee seats. I'm supposed to ask if you've had received the paper to follow, but it hasn't followed yet. So I'm going to turn to the leader and the deputy to give us an update. So, Councillor Tim Gibson.
Thank you. Do you want me to introduce the paper, Mr. Mayor, or to give you the update on...
A bit of both would be handy.
Okay. Right, so basically this paper is what it is. It sets out the changes to political balance and committee seat allocations, memberships as a result of the recent by-election, and changes to the membership of political groups. The Council's asked to agree with political balance calculations set out in Appendix 2. The Council has to allocate seats to those committees and to agree the appointment of members to those committees in accordance with the wishes of group leaders as set out in Appendix 3. And the update is we will be giving up a licensing seat from the Labour group.
Oh, and we'll be giving up a seat on health and housing. And Democratic Services have been informed who it is.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Perkin, as you're the group leader that will have to accept those slots, do you want to tell us who might be filling them so that we can do it all in one hit?
It's incredibly unfortunate that I'm being asked to do this right now in the meeting. I don't think that's really fair on my group. What I would like to request is that we are able to have a group discussion and then fill those seats. Happy with that selection. I want to move my group around because we're a very small group and want to make the most of where we go.
Mr. Mayor, could I? That seems wholly reasonable and sensible, Councillor Perkins, so you get no truck from me on that one. Thank you.
But I'm happy to second it.
Wonderful stuff. Right, so with that, would anybody wish to speak on it? Only the one, yeah, that stood up. That's fine, we're not there then. Right, so in that case, all those in favour, please raise your hands. This is on the motion and the recommendations, not on a recorded vote, by the way. And all those against, please. Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Excellent. Agenda item 15 is the Member Development Strategy. I will invite the Chair of the Member Development Working Group, Councillor Elliot Jays, to speak and propose the recommendations and note the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members and officers have worked hard on the Member Development Forum and this strategy. This strategy is a long way from where members found themselves in 2019. Training has come on leaps and bounds since then, and again I thank the officers. Any suggestions and other training needs, please speak to your group rep. Councillor Hunt, you'll be pleased to see there is a community safety briefing listed on briefings to be held, and that's on page 16 of the strategy. Date to be confirmed.
Councillor Worcester, as the Vice Chair, would you like to second, or would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
Happy to second, and I will speak now if that's okay. This is a perfect example of cross-party working in this council. It's a perfect example of cross-party working, and I would like to just add my thanks to Councillor Perkin for bringing forward such a really good idea to this group, and it has absolutely been the cornerstone of a good piece of work, I think, by this group. So maybe we should all look to this group as a good model of working for future reference. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bowen, you were next up, and then I've got Councillor Perkin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the strategy and the work of the group. Okay, the comments. I would like to add, however, that one frequently raised issue is the work-life balance of the role of being a councillor and being family-friendly. I would therefore request that the working group has an additional aim, even if it's not a formal one, relating to this. Part of that would be to ensure that development of councillors is also considerate of our personal needs and availability, particularly as more and more members work and events late afternoon and early evening are not easily accessible for some. I also respect that this presents challenges to those delivering the training or sessions, but there is little benefit delivering training for 6 people, with an example where the other 40 plus couldn't make the time. I'm being very extreme, but you get my point. But good report and welcome it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Perkin.
Thanks. Yeah, so I completely agree with Councillor Worcester that this has been a pleasure to be involved with, and actually it looks as a really progressive way of not only looking after councillors that are here already, but introducing new councillors to the council when they're first elected, which will mean hopefully that people will have a much smoother transition into becoming a councillor, because no one can really understand what it's like to be a councillor until you're literally in the middle of it. So hopefully we can prepare people a little bit before they end up here, and then when they do. So very kind comments from Councillor Worcester, thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Bowen about work-life balance. It is incredibly challenging to balance full-time work with being a councillor, and everything that we can do to make that a little bit easier would be very welcome. But yeah, completely commend the report and support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Would anybody else like to speak on this item? You weren't quick enough if you do, so let's move on to the vote. Those in favour, please raise. Just to make sure, anybody against? Any abstentions? Once again, we are unanimous. Who says we can't work cross-party? Right, we shall move on to our next item of business, which is agenda item 16, exclusion of press and public.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I'd like to make a point of order under the Local Government Act 1972, paragraph 10 of Schedule 12. And it states, you see, it's very interesting because when you look on the online agenda... And
which point of order are we going with?
Well, the point of order under 3.1.168 says that when I raise the point of order, I have to give an explanation of why. And that's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you look at the online element, you go to the Swale Council calendar, it says exclusion of the press, and it says under paragraph 1 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, the 1972 Act. However, if you then click down and to see the item 17 where it says waiver of the 6-month rule for a councillor, it then goes into, which I think is in the wrong location, because we have to decide whether this item is public or private. Is there an interest in the public, and does that interest in the public knowing outweigh the interest of confidentiality? And that's covered in paragraph 10, which basically says that information which falls into paragraphs 1 or 7 can be exempt information. However, we as members have to weigh that up. And I feel there's a great public interest to know if a councillor hasn't attended for 6 months and why. And what I'm baffled by is those member of Kent County Council who attended their full council on the 19th of September, they had an item there, a waiver, but that was in the public domain. And I've looked at many councils, Merton Council, Sheffield City Council, loads and loads of councils have it in the public domain. I think there is a public interest, because I could say, I'm laying at home with a bad back. And the public read that.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, point of order on this part. The member is now debating whether we should go into closed session or otherwise. It is not a point of order, Mr Mayor. Thank you. We should move on.
I propose that we should have a vote on not going into public.
Councillor Palmer, that's what we would do.
Okay.
As a general rule, if everybody agrees to go into private session, we go into private session. That is the vote. So we don't need to go through that way.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
We're not going to keep going points of order and going and debating whether we go into private session or not. The simple basis is that individuals have a right to the protection of their data. There is data on blue paper which may be referred to in the item, which relates to special category information that even as political parties you would not be exempt from to hold. So do bear that in mind if you decide that you don't want to go into private session. It may well be that no one wants to propose or second the item that's in or due to be in private session. If no one does, there will be no debate. Just to make that very, very clear. So, members, would you like to protect yourselves under GDPR and go into private session?
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Government Act 1972, Schedule.
How can we be told that we are protecting ourselves under GDPR when other councils do it? That's what I want to know. That's where I'm confused. Why we're telling...
It's up to members to vote at this point in time.
But we've been advised.
Members, do you wish to go into private session?
Point of order. Point of order.
Right, I want a show of hands then. All those in favour of going to private session?
Can we have a recorded vote, Mr Mayor?
Those against entering private session?
Sorry.
8, 9.
Any abstentions? Right, that's carried. We will be going into private session.
Mr Mayor, I'd like it recorded how I voted in the minutes. Thank you.
I would like to have it recorded how I voted in the minutes. Thank you.
If it helps, I'll just say outright that everybody in the Swale Independent Alliance group voted not to go into the private session, and that can be apart from Councillor Stephen, I think. Yeah, so the online members are going to be allowed to stay. We're just going to take a few minutes while we make sure that everything else is off. Just waiting for a red light so I can say meeting closed now. The fridge is well stocked, by the way, if anyone wants to come by, and there are snacks. Excellent, there we go. So with that, ladies and gents, thank you very much for joining this evening. Have a wonderful, safe journey home and a lovely rest of the month. We'll be back for full council in December. Please do join me in the parlour. Have a lovely rest of the day.